My father used to say that you don't measure a parent's success by your children, but by your grandchildren. While this is a wonderful aspiration, I think it's a lot harder than it might seem. What if I were to tell you that one of the greatest Jewish leaders we've ever had real problems transmitting Jewish commitment to the next generations of his family? And what if I told you there was a massive cover-up so that we would never learn about it? Tonight, we're going to lift the lid off the cover-up so that we can learn from it. The leader who I'm referring to is Moses. And as you can see, he was a man well ahead of his time. Moses and the tablets. Moses is an iconic figure in Judaism. Have you ever wondered for a second why Moses is referred to as Moshe Rabbeinu and not Moshe Avinu? Moses is our leader. For 40 years in the wilderness, he has to put up with a lot of stuff. We might imagine that we would have a paternal feeling towards him. But unlike Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he's referred to as Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our teacher, and not Moshe Avinu. Strangely enough, in the Torah, there's one instance where it says, here are the descendants of Moses, and it goes on to list the sons of Aaron. A little strange, no? This text subtly teaches us that the students of Moses were considered to be like his children. So what do we know about Moses' family? There's one story that comes to mind. According to our tradition, there was a 1-year gap between the time Moses left for Egypt and was reunited with his family after the Exodus. You know, there's a saying, behind every successful son-in-law is a surprised father-in-law. So, Moses' father-in-law, Yitro, hears about the miracles of the Exodus and decides it's time to reunite the family. And so the scene is set. Moshe's wife, Zipporah, his sons, Gershom and Eliezer, are waiting to meet Moshe. We can only imagine, right, the excitement and the thrill that Moshe's sons would feel wanting to see their dad after a year and wanting to hear about he led the Jews out of Egypt and how he split the Red Sea. But the text of the reunion reads like this. Moses leaves his tent. He greets his father-in-law. He bows and kisses him. They ask about each other's welfare, and they return to his tent. Something seems to be missing from this biblical reunion. What happened to hugging his wife? What happened to kissing his children? This is what I call the missing hug, if you will. How do we explain the missing hug? There are actually two interpretations. The first interpretation is the Torah doesn't tell us things that we already know. It just assumes that when we come home from a business trip, we hug our spouse and we kiss our kids. The second interpretation takes a more literal approach. It says that the Torah doesn't tell us about this hug and kiss because it didn't happen. Furthermore, Moses only goes out to meet Yitro because Yitro is the head of another nation. When I first heard this, I was a little disturbed, to be honest with you. Moses had legendary problems of time management. And with this missing hug, I was a little bit hesitant to draw conclusions. Furthermore, who am I to cast aspersions on our greatest leader of all time? Moses may have been our greatest leader of all time, but after he passes on, things don't go so smoothly. After Moses and Joshua, we enter into a period of the judges that is affectionately called the bad old days. It's a chaotic period when the Jewish people are organizing themselves in the land. In the midst of the book of Judges, there's an odd, almost random story about a Levite who becomes a priest, a Kohen, in an idolatrous shrine. At the end of the story, though, we find out his name. His name is Yehonatan ben Gershom ben Menashe. And when we look at the name Menashe in the text, something seems a little bit strange. There appears to be what we might call a high nun. No, not a, yeah. Do-do-do-do-do. Or some people have said, do you mean a flying nun? No, I actually mean a high nun. Whenever we have a problem with the Jewish text or a question, we turn our attention to Rashi, our foremost Jewish commentator in France who lived about 1,000 years ago. And Rashi tells us that the nun was inserted into the text. And for us to understand who the grandfather of this Levite who becomes a Kohen is, we have to take away the nun. And when we do so, we find something startling. By taking away the nun, we find out that that this was the grandson of Moses. When I first heard this text, I literally fell off my seat. I didn't know what to do with myself. It didn't make sense. How could the greatest leader of the Jewish people of all time have a grandson who prayed to idols? Back then, praying to idols was really like one of the worst things that you could do. It was a total rejection of the faith of Abraham, the monotheistic ideal of Abraham, let alone Moses. So I turned my attention back to Rashi, and Rashi says that the nun was added out of respect for Moses. By saying out of respect for Moses, what Rashi means is that this was an embarrassment. An embarrassment in the Bible, friends, there are many, right? We have homicide, we have disappointment, we have pain, we have murder, we have embarrassment. We have Cain killing Abel, we have Joseph's brothers, throwing him into a pit and selling him into slavery. We also have, just a couple months after leaving Egypt with all of the great miracles, the Jewish people build a golden calf. They go back to idolatry itself. So we can learn about all of this, but we can't learn about Moses' grandson praying to idols? For real? I think there is a scandal afoot. I think what's happening here is that the sages who create this cover-up are nervous about Moses' reputation. But I have news for them. If we look at the Bible itself, we have a lot of stories about Moses' character flaws and personal challenges. Moses has anger issues. Moses has a speech impediment. Moshe is known for working 24/7. Moses is the guy who didn't want the job and repeatedly asked to be excused. So we're really worried about us seeing Moses as being anything less than perfect? That's already in the Bible itself. I think the roots of this cover-up go even deeper. I think they're worried about the legacy of Moses. That's the scandal afoot. Perhaps, this cover-up is about not adding another blemish to his record. Wasn't it bad enough that Moses doesn't get a chance to enter into the promised land? Perhaps, just perhaps, this cover-up is about protecting God and God's choice of a messenger. Perhaps, just perhaps, this cover-up is about the sages being afraid that we won't follow Moses if his family wouldn't follow Moses. I believe that this cover-up has very deep roots in our tradition, and it was perpetrated because it cut close to home. It was too close to home for them and for us. Leadership is not an exact science. Neither is parenting. We may try as hard as we can to do the best for our children, to do the best for our communities, but the truth is, so much is out of our control. For our children, let alone our grandchildren. What disturbs me most about this story is by creating this cover-up, it's as if the sages ignore who we are as the Jewish people at our essence. Our name, Yisrael, means one who wrestles with God. We've always been a people who have wrestled with the big ideas, wrestled with the real ideas. And so perpetrating this cover-up robs us of the opportunity to wrestle with Moses' life and to learn from it. Furthermore, this cover-up robs us of the opportunity to see our leaders and to see our parents as having flaws and accepting them for who they are. While whoever perpetrated this cover-up had the best of intentions, it ultimately robs us of the opportunity to dig deeper into our tradition and to learn from it. We live in an age with serious issues facing the Jewish people and the world. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our children. We owe it to our grandchildren to wrestle with the real issues. That, by doing so, we will have the opportunity to create a strong future for our children and for our grandchildren. And truth be told, our future success depends on it. Thank you all very much.